Are some of us receptors of information inside other people? Information that has not been expressed through the five senses. The other day, as a friend and I were out walking my new family dog, she began explaining to me this phenomenon by which a dog can sense the energy of the people around it and respond accordingly. I interjected that I think really, don't we have that ability too? Many of us might insist we have felt the energy of another.
Like, whoa, did you just get the total creeps when that guy walked by? It was just so, ugh.
Though afterwards, we may have a difficult time explaining exactly what we were perceiving. We might lump that experience into a social skills category, like empathy. In fact, people who consistently demonstrate this energy detection are known by some as empaths. And while that term suggests a transfer of mood, it doesn't attempt to explain how the energy is transferred in the absence of apparent signals. Can there really be an extrasensory exchange? And if so, what about the transmitter? Is their involvement in this broadcast involuntary, or must there be willing participation? Consent. I imagine stepping through a beaded doorway as I nervously fish a tightly folded 20 from that pocket you can only fit 2 fingers in. Hi, are you Madame Esmeralda? Then, with those same 2 fingers, sliding it down the curved inside of an overstuffed fish bowl, before I am invited to sit down. As her eyes direct mine to this hand-shaped chalk outline on the table, where for more than a couple of generations, other seekers have consented to transmit God knows what to this seer. I place my hand palm up in the outline and slowly return my eyes to hers. And who I see is a living mystery. A woman who has made this endeavor of sight her life's focus. That premise alone is both alarming and disarming in its boldness. A chosen life, placing her on the outskirts of so much more than commerce. Her work draws from a somehow beautiful and frightening energy, first evidenced, broadcasted if you will, by the ambiance of this place, and then, more extremely, by the depths of her gaze. Locked into those eyes, how will myself and all its mysteries be able to keep anything hidden? Welcome back to the Outskirts Podcast with Tanner and friends. Today we are expanding the format of the show to include multiple storytellers in our search for experiences of psychic knowledge. Take a deep breath and please steady your nerves as we step through the beaded curtain in an episode we've titled On the Outskirts of Knowing.
How do you want to start this? Anyway, it was my grandmother, and her maiden name was Fleischman. They were very Irish. She was born in New York, but her family was from Ireland. They were from the Black Irish. But she had auburn hair and a lot of freckles. She just always called it the Black Irish. My grandmother lived in the town of Wheatfield, New York. It was near Niagara Falls, and that's pretty much where she was from. She was born with what they called a veil over her face. They said that if you were born with that, you were gifted somehow. You have special powers. She used to bring people into her home maybe 2 or 3 times a week to give them a reading. That was her livelihood. She did what they called tea leaf reading. And they had to call it that because you couldn't just bring somebody in and give them a reading of their life. It was against the law to charge for it or to do it. She always had a teacup there. She would have the person who she was going to do the reading for pick up the cup and turn it upside down and have their hand on it. I don't know what that did, but that was something she always had them do. I don't know. It almost makes you feel like something goes through it. She had given this lady a reading. The Genesee River kept coming up about someone around the Genesee River, a boy, she said it was. And the lady said, well, I don't know what you're talking about. I have no one that would be around there. Then the next day, the lady called Grandma and said that her grandson had drowned in the Genesee River.
I'm so sorry.
And then another one of her helping things was she had known someone and they were searching for a lost boy. And this lady knew gentlemen that worked for the FBI and they were on the case. So the lady had already had readings from my grandmother and she said, why don't you talk to her?
How do you use those chopsticks, Johnson? Waiter, can I get a fork? Now listen here. What difference does it make if the tip comes from a little green man in a flying saucer, the Dalai Lama, or one of these damn fortune cookies? If it helps us find a kid. To hell with this silly state law. I'm a federal agent. I'm going over there. Today.
And they had to do it on the slide because, like I said, it was against the law for her to be able to have this reading for them that, that would help them. And she, yeah, it was the FBI. And so she told them where to look for him and they found him. It was just like a miracle, but they couldn't give her any credit. They couldn't even mention her name because, as I said, it was against the law to do that. And then she also helped a priest, and he was from Niagara Falls area, and she couldn't tell us what she helped him with. Of course, we probably didn't want to know.
What was it like? Did she explain at all what it was with the priest? Did she go into someone's home or?
No, he came to her.
Good afternoon, Father. Hello, Florence. Is now a good time? Why don't you come in for a cup of tea? Ah, that's exactly what I'd hoped you'd say. I'm having a bit of a situation with one of the parishioners.
Yeah, he came to her for a reading. He was troubled by something, I guess, and he maybe did something he wasn't supposed to. I don't know. And so she helped him out with that. When we were there little kids, we always wanted to stay overnight. And she'd say, well, you can stay overnight, but you got to stay in the back room because she was doing her readings, She did it right in her kitchen at the kitchen table. They'd call and make appointments. And she had quite a following. She was always getting phone calls because she only took a certain amount. She couldn't just take them all, It was too much. Another situation was my Aunt Dorothy didn't realize that she had a heart problem. And my grandmother kept saying, you need to go get this checked. You need to go get it checked. And about 2 weeks after that, she died. And it was a severe heart disease that she had. So, that was another incident that, she talked to them about and then it happened. She loved the horse races. I mean, absolutely loved them. But, her powers never did anything for her for winning on a horse bet or anything. She couldn't tell, she couldn't tell anything about that. It was just with people. I don't know. My papi used to go to what do you call those guys that take bets for you? It was illegal too. Yeah, a bookie. He used to go back to the barber shop and make bets on the boxing matches.
There he is.
Hey, George.
Hey, you want the Jimmy Stewart or the Clark Gable this time?
Yeah, just trim it up and give me 20 on Benita Lynch.
Are you sure you don't want Canzaneri?
Nah, Canzaneri's a bum.
Did your wife tell you something?
Look, I told you she can't see sports. Would I lose this much if she could?
Okay, all right. Don't bite my head off.
Give me a break.
And she never helped him with that either. So, it's just some kind of a different sense. One of the other things I remember is my grandmother said to me, you're going to meet someone and the initials are PS. And I thought, oh yeah, right. She's crazy, And I said, okay, yeah. You just brush it off, 6 months after that, I met Pete. I'm from a city called Tonawanda, and that means swift water. I know there was a lot of, was the Iroquois tribe there, wasn't it?
Well, could have been one of the federations of the Iroquois.
Yeah.
And I'm from Cheektowaga. That means land of the crab apple.
Of course, Pete and I, we met in February,
No, we met in December.
Met in December, engaged in February, and married in July. So it was pretty quick.
But we met at the bowling alley.
Yeah, we met at the bowling alley.
And you both were dating other people as well.
Yes, we were. Yeah. And we eloped in July. Nobody knew about anything about it. And we went to tell my grandmother about it, and she already had a card all set with money in it for us. Yeah. I mean, it was crazy. Pete had lost his wedding ring. Dark place, she kept saying, your ring's in a dark place. And we couldn't find it anywhere. And so I bought him another one. And we were out on a friend's boat, and he went to hold on to the top part of the boat and cut his finger really bad. So we had to take him, and they had to have it cut off.
Not my finger, the ring.
Yeah, the ring. He had to have the ring cut off. And so then about, a few months later, it was getting chilly out, and he went to put his gloves on, and the ring was in his gloves.
Yeah, she didn't tell him exactly where, but your ring's in a dark place. It's there. It's just in a dark place. So you didn't have to get another one.
Right. I didn't ask her too many questions because sometimes there were things you didn't want to know. She was a pretty amazing lady.
Thank you to Nancy and Pete for sharing those amazing stories. And thank you to Carrie, their daughter, and my friend, for making the introduction. It was Carrie's dog whispering that inspired the discussion at the beginning of this episode, and it seems Carrie's intuition extends beyond dogs. As the great-granddaughter of Florence, I guess she gets it honest. Hi, friends. Well, it's that time of year again. We're all going to be buying way too much Halloween candy. You know, you can't buy too little, but on November 1st, what to do with all the leftovers? You want to eat it, but you can't, and you shouldn't bribe your kids with it. That's where Billy Bob's Candy Removal Service comes into play. If you live in the Houston metropolitan area, give Billy Bob's Candy Removal Service a call. You'll be glad you did. Thanks, Billy Bob's Candy Removal Service. Welcome back to episode 3 of the Outskirts Podcast with Tanner and friends. In the first half of the show, our storyteller Nancy led us on a tour through the wonders of extrasensory perception, with a glimpse into her grandmother Florence's life behind the veil. If you haven't heard of the rare scenario in which a child is born with a veil or with the call, and the fascinating, multicultural spanning traditions and folklore that surround that event, then treat yourself to a deep dive after the show. But first, we join our next storyteller, Martha, as she guides us on the second half of our journey on the Outskirts of Knowing.
Okay, we ready? Now, I'm not crazy. Well, maybe a little bit, but I do think there are people who really do have a special insight to what the future holds. And, in the Bible, they were called prophets. Now they are called seers. But I do believe that there are people that have this talent or gift, I think I would say, because it was given to them. Several years ago, I would go to a Paramart in Dallas, and there was a vendor in one of the showrooms, and she said, if you want something, different to do tonight, there's a psychic that lives in a nearby town. She told us that she had gone for a visit, and the psychic told her something about her 4 children, and she said, no, I only have 3. And the psychic said, no, you have 4. And she told us, she said, I had an abortion and had never, ever told anyone until she said this. So she said, actually, I had 4. So, needless to say, we thought this was going to be fun. I think there's a difference between psychics and fortune tellers because I've been to some of those.
With the help of the spirits and my tarot cards, I can see your life even more clearly than you can yourself. He likes to fish, right?
Yeah, he goes fishing all the time.
They're like, bring a dozen eggs. We want to look at the yolk. You find out later, yeah, they just needed eggs. It was at her house, and it was an older home. And, whoever she was reading for would go into her bedroom. Her name was June, and her husband had left her because he told her she was crazy. So, but not wanting to give any information to this psychic, when I went in, I only said that I was married and had 2 children. And she would lie down on the bed and put this huge geo rock on her stomach. And then she would wait a few minutes, and when she got ready to talk, she would tell me to press the recording button. At that time, we had cassettes because she would say, I'm just going to start talking, and I don't know really what I'm saying. I'm just talking. And she said, what I say may happen immediately, or it might be 2 years from now. That's the reason I'm giving you a cassette. The first time I went, when I left, my hand was shaking so hard that I couldn't even get the keys to the car. First visit, she told me that my daughter would go to college, but that my son would never go to college. And it just so happened my daughter did go to college, and we had my son enrolled in a university. And the week before he went, he was playing Sunday football, twisted his knee, had to have multiple surgeries. We moved, and he never went to college. He went to a trade school, but he never went to college. The next time I went to see her, it was fall market. By this time, we're getting to be good friends. And she said, your husband is going to come home and tell you that he is leaving his job. Well, I just fell apart. I thought, well, that's absurd. He's never said anything about being unhappy with his job. The last week of October, he came home and he said, I have quit my job. I'm going to a mill in Alabama. He was with Paper Mill. I said, okay. And so the next visit I went, and I said, my God, you're right. We are moving to Alabama. She said, no, you're not. You will never live there. I said, oh, yes, we will. I've already found a house I'm going to buy. She said, you're not going to live there. She said, I see you traveling long distances. And she said, what I see is when you get there, you're going to have a house, and it's going to have entwined limbs over the house. She said, so it will be an older house. And she said, I see water in front of it. Well, we moved to Washington. That was the long distances. I looked everywhere for a new house. There was just none. There was some being built. And so real estate lady says, I've got a house, that you can lease for 2 years, and then we'll find you a house. It's in the older part of town. I'm like, oh, okay, I'll go look at it. And it was right in front of a lake. And those tree limbs, when you would drive down that street, you felt like you were driving through trees. I thought, that's so weird. But that was the only place that was available. So by this time, I've gotten to know her. We get to be good friends. And I would just lie down on the bed beside her, because some of the sessions were long. And she'd go into her little trance, and I'd punch the button. And the next time I went, she said, Lord, have you bought a red refrigerator? I said, June, do I look like I would have a red refrigerator? No, I did not buy one. She said, I don't know. When I get this feeling, it's a large piece of metal, and I see red. And when I went home, when I drove into the driveway, there was a red car sitting in the driveway. I get kind of shaky. I said, well, what's this? And my husband said, it was our daughter. He said, I bought her a new car. And it was a red Celica. That was the large piece of red metal. We had never mentioned buying a car at all. When I would listen to the cassettes years later, I could see things that I never even thought about. But when something would happen, I'd go back and get out my cassettes, and I'm like, oh gosh, she told me that was going to happen. It was just an interesting experience. I'll put it that way. Okay, another incident was psychics. I had a friend that was an artist, and he would read tarot cards, and we all went on a trip together. And when we were sitting around, we went to the Savannahs where we went. We said, get out your tarot cards. We knew he had brought them. When he took the cards out, that they were wrapped in what I call swaddling cloths. And I never really knew what swaddling cloth would look like, but the minute I saw it, that's the first thing I thought of. The cloth was old, it was tattered. Maybe it used to be white, but now, it had aged. And when he unwrapped it, it was like he was unwrapping something so precious. He was very careful when he unfolded the fabric. And when he took the cards out, the cards were old and worn too. And it wasn't a joke, and it wasn't for entertainment. He was there to read for you. It meant something to him. So he read for me. He said, when you go home, your daughter's going to tell you she's pregnant, and it's going to be a girl. And the minute I got home, she said, Mother, I'm pregnant. I had no idea they were trying. And when the baby was born, it was a little girl. He actually felt like I could be a card reader. So he taught me how to read the touching cards. And so, I was just doing it for fun, a party and stuff, our little supper club. Well, this woman came to where I worked, and she said, I want you to do me a business reading. I said, I don't know how to do a business reading. I just put these cards out and start talking. She said, well, let's do that. So when I put them out, I said, you're losing money somehow. And I think that's something you might need to check on. Well, she came back and she said, I knew that girl was stealing from me. And she said, I had fired her, and thank you. I said, look, I did not say that. And my husband was furious. He said, you got that girl fired. I said, I did not mention stealing once. I said, you are losing money. I said, she could be spending too much money and need to cut back or something. I said, it's not my fault. Well, he told me I had to get rid of my cards.
Did you?
Yeah, I did. June had already lost her husband. I didn't want to lose mine, So when we left Washington, we moved to Mississippi. I found this wonderful, wonderful, great 2-story older house, I was working with a real estate agent, and she said, you need to buy this house today. And I said, I cannot. I'm leaving for Paris in 2 days, and I don't have time. I said, I'll do it when I get back. And she said, it won't be here when you get back. I said, well, I can't help it. I just got to take my chances. When I got back, the house was still for sale. So I bought it and was, clean and all that kind of stuff. On the top shelf in the owner's closet was a plane ticket where she had been to Paris. And it was the exact dates that I had gone to Paris, but many years before. And there were also some old duplicate bridge cards. And I also play bridge. When I found this, I said, I was meant to have this house. I just know I was. And my son even told me, he said, Mother, all the houses you've lived in, he said, this is your home. This is your house. This house fits you more than any house you've ever lived in. Okay, so when we were renovating, the painters were working in the master bedroom, and it had been painted many times, so there was many layers of paint. And they scraped down, they said, you are painting this room the color that it was painted many, many years ago. This is a match to the color that she had painted it originally. So things just kept happening, and I said, yep, this is my house. It is me, it's meant for me. But one day I went to buy groceries, and I came back and I was walking through the living room, and all the prisms on the chandelier were off. And I thought, well, what happened? Well, I looked, and there was a huge glass square coffee table right underneath the chandelier. The prisms were under that table. And I said, there is no way. There is no way those prisms would fall and all of them be underneath this table. Several weird things kind of like that happened, but I couldn't understand why these things were happening. Now, the lady that owned the house, Miss Edward, I'm going to call her, I still think her spirit's there in that house. And there was noise and hammering and strangers, and I think this was disturbing to her. I mean, I really do. But one day there was a knock on the door, and I went to the front door, and there was two people I didn't know. And she said, I'm a little girl that used to live in this house. And the lady with her, she said, and this was our maid. I'd always heard that there was a problem between the daughter and her family. Somebody had told me these stories because when they had an estate sale, she wanted nothing from the house, nothing. And this was a very fine family. There was an oil portrait of her over the fireplace. And so they asked her, don't you want that? She said, no, I want nothing from this house. Well, it ends up, the story was that she had gotten married, had a child, came out of the closet, announced that she was gay, and her parents took her to court and took the child away from her. And so when they got custody, she wanted nothing ever to do with them. Now, she was speaking in a very Southern drawl. It was kind of funny. She said, well, I see that little playhouse is still over in the side yard. And I said, yes, we've done some work on it. She said, I never darkened the doors of that little playhouse that Mama had brought up from the South Side. And neither did I want to wear those little frilly dresses that she kept trying to put on me. And so she said, may I look and see what you're doing to the house? I've heard you're renovating. And I said, yes. So she went through the house and she said, she lived in another town. She said, the next time I'm in town, do you mind if I come back to the house? And I'm like, no, she brought me some old pictures of the house. So the second time she came back, she walked through the house and she said, my mother would love everything that you have done to this house. So I don't think there's any reason for me to ever have to return. So I thought, well, what does that mean? Did her mother tell her to come look at the house? I mean, exactly. But she said, I will never return. It had a large kitchen, and I couldn't decide what to do with the kitchen. It just had brown paneling on it, and I didn't like that. So being an artist, I'm going to paint the walls. So I started painting, and I painted a cupboard at one end with the pretty decorative plates in it, and things that were higher up because the ceilings were very high. So at the other end of the kitchen, there was another huge wall. And I said, I'm going to paint Miss Edward on that wall. Didn't know what she looked like. So I painted this very elegant lady with a long skirt on, with a skirted table beside her, flower arrangement, and I put a cup of coffee in her hand. Now, I didn't know whether she drank tea or coffee. So every morning, that was my routine to go in the kitchen and I'd say, well, Miss Vera, how are you doing this morning? Do you want coffee or do you want tea? We became friends, and I thought maybe this will help all the little disturbances I was having if I was friends with her. Another strange thing was I developed cancer when I was preparing for a large art show. And this was the house in Mississippi. And I had turned the basement into a studio. And while I was going through my cancer treatment, each morning when I'd wake up, there was paint on whatever I'd slept in. And I thought, well, this is weird. I don't even remember going down there painting. So I called my doctor. He had bought quite a few of my paintings. And I said, do you think this medicine is doing this to me? I said, because I can't even remember doing these paintings. And he said, well, do you like your paintings? And I said, yeah. He said, well, don't get off the medicine then, But one of the paintings that I did, it's all in browns and kind of a rusty color. And you do see shapes that look like, oh, that could be a foot. And there's several that are look like skulls. They're not white. They're all in the umber colors. And then the keys, for years, I had been collecting old keys, like skate keys, the key that went around the vein of sausage, and just old keys. I glued these keys all the way around the edge of the painting. There was not one more or one less. It was the exact number of keys that I had collected. So at the show, somebody came up to me and they said, well, this painting's just real disturbing. And I said, yes, it is in a way. I said, those are your troubles. But I said, look, there's 98 keys around that painting. There is a key to your problem. But you have to find the right key. Now, several magazines, World Interiors, they wanted to photograph the house, and I just never wanted to go to all that trouble and everything. So, but when I sold the house, the lady that bought the house painted the kitchen over everything. Well, the people from town, the house was always toured. They just were irate. They were calling me saying, can you believe what she's done to the house? You know, she took those velvet draperies down. She's painted over the kitchen. And I said, look, y'all, that's her house. She has to make it her. Well, right after she painted over Miss Edwards' painting in the kitchen, she was having a big dinner party. And the chandelier fell from the ceiling right smack in the middle of the dining room table. Well, everybody in town was laughing. They were just going crazy. I had phone call after phone call. They said, Miss Edward got her back for painting over, you know. Yeah, so Miss Edwards got her revenge, you know. Okay, during COVID, my husband got sick and I took him to the hospital. And that's back when they wouldn't let you come in the hospital, you know, so I had to leave him there by himself. Well, later that afternoon, he called and he said, I'm in a helicopter. They're taking me to another hospital. Go get our daughter and come down. You got to leave right now and meet me at the hospital. So we took off really fast, you know, so driving, he'd call us, you know, you got to hurry. We're going over the speed limit. But my daughter told me on the way down, she said, Mother, the weirdest thing happened this morning. She said, I was in the kitchen and a red bird flew into the window and died. And she said, we don't ever have red birds. She said, I've never seen a red bird where we live. And I said, well, poor little thing, you know, just bury it, whatever. That was my husband's favorite bird. He always carried a little picture of a red bird in his wallet. I have it in my wallet now. But by the time we reached the hospital, because of COVID, you know, only one person could go up. So she said, you go on. So I went up and I didn't have but a couple of seconds because they were ready to take him into surgery. So I hugged his neck, you know, told him how much I loved him and all that kind of thing. And bam, he was wheeled away. Well, she was so upset because she didn't have a chance. She said, oh, I didn't get a chance to see him. I didn't get a chance to talk to him. I'm like, that's okay. He'll understand. Well, he died during surgery. She was so upset. After she went home a couple of days later, all these red birds came to her front yard and sat there for a few minutes and then all flew away. She said, Mother, that is so weird. It is just so weird. I said, I think that was just a minute. I think that was a message from your dad. And he was saying, don't worry. You didn't really have to talk to me because I know you've always loved me and I love you too. And I do think that. I just miss him so much. He was so good to me. And one day on my patio, I was sitting out there, was just crying. And what I was doing was having a pity party. I was saying, oh, I just can't do this. I'm making wrong decisions. I just miss you so much. Everything's going wrong and I can't help it. I'm doing my best, but things are just going wrong. And I just can't do this. I just can't do it. A red bird came and sat on the fence. And I knew it was him saying, it's going to be hard, but you're going to get through this.
Thank you, Martha, for sharing those amazing and heartfelt stories. As with Florence, the gifts of sight Martha experienced seemed to derive from an unknown, mystical source, which, in the case of Florence, was signaled or perhaps even caused by her rare birth. But there are others. Now, for me, it seems clear that occasionally our loved ones are permitted to send signs of comfort from the other side. And what a comfort that must be. However, going out looking for them? Now, that's a different matter altogether, and perhaps a very dangerous matter. Because what also seems as clear as, well, night, is that there are nefarious forces at work on both sides of the veil. Forces just waiting for someone to reach blindly into the dark. In spite of all the danger, there are those for whom the source of their rare insight is the dead, necromancers. While the practice of necromancy is not a new one under the sun, it has always existed as a taboo or even illegal one. From what I can tell by my reading, necromancy is strictly forbidden by the Quran, the Torah, and the Judeo-Christian Bible, sometimes referred to as bone conjuring by the Hebrews. The penalty of death was still not enough to dissuade all from the practice or the knowledge it held. One of the most intriguing stories from the early years of my own religious education was that of the first king of Israel, as I imagined him, sneaking to a cave on the outskirts of town, seeking help from the witch of Endor. You see, Saul was in a bind and desperately needed the advice of Israel's most revered prophet, Samuel. The only problem, Samuel was dead.
Who do you seek?
Samuel, the prophet.
Ah. Remove your cloak, Saul, king of Israel. You cannot hide yourself from the bodiless eye. Step forward. Walk that way into the mouth of blackness until you see no light.
What's that smell? Those sounds.
Saul, why have you woken me?
Samuel? I can't bear this.
If you don't know, that meeting didn't end well for King Saul, and perhaps it's stories like that which have helped to secure the warning label to the pursuit of communication with the dead. Yet, still in modern times, we have recorded accounts of monarchs, parliamentarian leaders, dictators, presidents, and titans of industry who have enlisted the help of those who speak to the dead, some, perhaps like Saul, in pursuit of power. I don't know about you, but I find political power lust a motivation worthy of a horrific ending. Throughout history, young men and women, often children, have been marched off to fight and die at the behest of political figures like Saul. The cost of war, if only measured by loss of life, has had such an impact on the world that we can't know what good we've missed in missing the sawn-off futures of so many. This unknowable pain must resonate nowhere as deeply as in the fractured hearts and minds of the families left behind. Regular people who, after the Civil War, or World War I, or Vietnam, or a horrific disease or a tragic accident, are left tumbling, churning in the never-calming wake of the devastation of child loss. It was this pain which gave rise to the spiritualism movement, which reached its peak somewhere between the second half of the 1800s and the first half of the 1900s. At least that's what most historians have written, and it certainly seems a plausible explanation. With the endorsement of public figures like Queen Victoria, Mary Todd Lincoln, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, and a long list of others who sought comfort from contact with the other side, spiritualism became the 8th largest religion in Britain, with presumably comparable participation in the United States. Unfortunately, as is always the case, desperate people made for easy prey for charlatans lying in wait. And they did come out of the woodworks, sometimes literally, as in the case of the Fox sisters, who in the 1840s in upstate New York, not far from Florence's hometown, began reporting spirit rappings on their bedroom walls, which began a whirlwind tour of staged live events, whereby the sisters communicated with the dead through a series of taps and knocks.
Quiet, please. The sisters will not take the stage until there is sustained silence. Thank you.
Someone here has lost a son to cholera.
We lost a son to cholera. Please, we've traveled 3 days. His name was Robert. Can he hear us? Is it him? Robert!
You can almost imagine the collective sigh of relief heaved by a world ravaged by death and fear of death when they discover, or at least are made to believe that they've discovered, that life goes on. A sentiment already stated by the body of popular religious practices, but as we stated earlier, the major religions of that day and this one denounced communication with the dead, even for the desperately grieving. Still today, there are celebrity mediums who claim to connect the bereaved with the deceased, and it seems to be bigger business than ever. There seems to be no end of the celebrity promotion of mediumship, as any online search will render a very long list of content links. In fact, this form of entertainment, the dead as entertainment, seems to be on the rise. And in an age of relative peace and significantly decreased child mortality rates, entertainment does seem to be the right word for the genre we'll call public mediumship. With content like Hollywood Medium in the forefront, it may seem somehow easier to associate larger-than-life figures to these stranger-than-life activities. But these activities are not just the play of the famous and the infamous. You see, as was the case in the days of the Fox sisters, and the parlor medium, and the ectoplasm photographer, the thing about human nature, at least for a great many of us, we like a little danger, and we love to be afraid. Movies, books, and podcasts of stories where paranormal mayhem results from meetings with necromancers and spirit board use continue to top charts. It's clear many of us are drawn to these stories. And then, for some, the interest facilitates more than a night out at the movies. And it's you to whom I now speak. Please. 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 Beware. Please submit written or audio summary of your story to outskirts@tannerandfriends.com. Yep.